All right, good evening and welcome to another exciting tutorial. Today we'll be looking at making mugs. All right, let's jump into it. I'm going to delete our default cube and you kind of just want to work with what your original base shape would be. What I'm going to do is just import as a image plane. Button there by adding it. Perhaps we can use as an example something like files. Oh, sorry about that. All right, let's go. First things first. Add a basic shape of something we can use for our base shape. We could use a cylinder, we could use even a cube, and we could get the results we want. So I'll stick with something simple like a circle. Circle typically has no edges. I'm going to add something here. And afterwards, we'll deal with scaling, but right now we just want to get the model out of the way first. I will add type. Nothing's fine. Let's zoom in. Extrude on Z, right? Just gonna give myself somewhat of a working point. Click on this, pull this behind this, and just so we can line it up properly, I'll scale this down so I can get about the right average proportions. Something kind of like this. Into wireframe view. And this essentially is gonna be what we have. Let's do two things. One, select that, move it down on the Z axis. And the next thing I want to do is kind of curve this shape that we have here. So let's assume the base of it is going to be something kind of like this. We also want to just start fixing up the some loop cuts by pressing Ctrl R and scale that up with this properly. And another 2 points, I'm going to put in a couple of loop cuts so I can work out here and also here. Those are where that's going to come from. Same thing for this top and look at the thickness of it. Be about here. Same thing for this one. That is stone. That's what it would look like for now. Currently, if we go into a solid view, we're getting a shape much like this. The bottom here isn't filled in, so I'll highlight all this by holding Alt and clicking, or if that doesn't work, you can go into, well, in some options, double click. If you have Alt as your example, if you're emulating the middle mouse button in your inputs, then you'd have to double click. So emulate 3-button mouse, double click to get that option. So I'm going to extrude, press escape to keep it on the same place and kind of pull it in a bit. What I'm going to do afterwards is not to do I would typically do this and scale towards the center and press M to center it, but I don't want to do that because that's going to cause some pinching later. what I can do instead, I'll just scale this in and we'll do grid fill instead. So you can go into, I believe it's, if I'm not mistaken, edge. Base, is it mesh? I'll just do the shortcut F3. Make sure this is highlighted and type in grid. Fill that out as a grid. It's going to give us much smoother surfaces. That's the next thing. Let's actually create this extrusion. So I'm going to select the two sides here. I imagine my mug is going to be here. Let's go to face selection mode, or 3 on your keyboard. Imagine what the thickness could be. I don't imagine it being much more than that. Hold shift to make sure you're selecting both. It could go further like so, but I don't imagine it going quite that far. So I'm going to choose those two and these two as well. I imagine also it's going to be extruded out, so E, and go on along the x-axis like so. Now there's more you could do. I could probably extrude again, E, along, try this out. And what I'll do for each of them is I'll just manually go in and rotate them a bit. So this one, let's say we're going to rotate this, say 45, so R45 based on my view, and carry it down on the z-axis by about this much. 1, 2, get it in from front view. Just a smidge away. Last but not least, we're going to just merge these two elements. So I'm going to do a thing. Here and here, it should line up. So we'll go to face selection mode, 1, 2, 3, 4, and delete faces, or rather, yeah, let's just delete the faces. That's going to create that for me. Let me hide my empty so it doesn't get in the way. And what we need to do afterwards is to go into edge selection mode. Select our edges, 1, hold Alt and click, hold Shift while pressing Alt and click. And we're just going to merge these faces or bridge the gaps. Bridges will look at empty slots, and if they fill in, if they have the same amount of vertices, edges, and faces, it can fill that in automatically. So press F3 and just type in bridge. Oops, it's going to do that for me. So this is our mug. It's a very rough kind of mug. We do need additional stuff in there. So if you look at it now, and look at our reference, which I'll just move along the X. Select more by pressing Control Numpad plus, moving this over on X-axis. And if we smooth it out with the subdivision surface modifier, you're going to notice a few things happening. So subdivision surface, it's very jarring. It's trying to smooth out some stuff, but we need to tighten some of these edges. So I'm going to edit mode. We're going to tighten some of these edges right here. I'm going to click here and just go all the way up. Or we could actually mark a seam or crease. So same thing on the outside of the mug. It's going to go like this and just create a loop cut and slide it like so. Or rather, I think better here would be that same crease option. So edge selection mode there, and there should be an option for edge crease. Let's pull that out like so, all the way out, creates that crease for me. Hold Alt and click, hold Shift Alt and click, and do the same thing with the edge crease, just carry it all the way out. Right. It's not a perfect solution. It's not perfectly smooth either. So I'm going to create a few loop cuts here, pressing plus or mouse wheel up to add additional. And Next thing we're going to be doing is just smoothing our surface. So we can click on Object and choose to shade auto smooth. It's going to give you something like that. I'm going to do the same thing here. Just crease that and do the we get something much more like that. Now here is kind of tight for me. So probably one of the things we need to do is just adjust that so we can see better looking results, much smoother looking results. Here is where the issue is happening when it comes. If I were to move this up a bit, crease right there. We don't want. Can I do? Can I smooth it out by adding another loop cut? Same thing here. Control R. Smoothing for me. Let's crease also these edges here. 2, 3. Type in edge crease. Creases that for me, and I get something like that. We're trying to avoid as best as possible any pinching that could occur, and I'm seeing some very slight pinching occurring somewhere around here and here. I think those are currently negligible. I believe if we increase the amount of viewport levels, we can actually fix that. And so you're getting something looking much more like this. The only problem now is that the inside needs to be thickened. And there's ways and means we can actually thicken it, but for now I'm just gonna work with extruding. Extrude and scaling it in. And imagine the thickness going down. So I'm gonna go E, Z, and carry it down. So from front view, in wireframe view, or X-ray view, you can actually see how far it goes down. And I'll just do a little bit of tweaking here. E, Z, carry it down some more. Just a smidge more. Imagine the thickness getting thick about like that. Scale, probably move down a bit. And last but not least, you're gonna do another grid fill. So we're creating something like that. This is what we get. There's a problem here. Right here doesn't have the tightness that we need. So I'm going to go into edge selection mode here. We're going to do a slight bevel. Bring up our tools by pressing T, press bevel, and you can create a very nice little bevel here. And you're getting just that part. Now there's an additional section here, which would be this part here, the metallic rim. So let's do an extrusion here. And hold Alt, click, press Control plus num sign. And what we're going to do is just duplicate, or probably do an extrusion. Probably Shift D to duplicate it, move it up on the Z axis, like so. And extrude it down, again on the Z axis. Like get that nice little crease. That's our mug. I think it could be a little bit smaller in terms of here, the height. Carry that on the Z. Plus GZ, carry it down a bit. And now let's actually put some stuff on this. Right, so let's tighten this a bit. I don't think it's tight enough in terms of the crease that it's giving us. The same. Hold Alt axis 0 to flatten it. And just move it back down. So we get a nice little crease there. Satisfied, you can always move it up just a bit. If you want to create some sort of a thing, do that. Loop cut, edge loops, and extrude this down. Sorry. Just rest it inside here. So select the linked ones, press G then Z, and just carry this in like so. Let's actually get some good lighting also, actual colors. Right, I won't deal with the wording today, just to get that. Now imagine this wasn't actually a rim, but more like a cover. So we'll just leave that part out for now. One. Let's get some shading in here. We're going to add materials. So how do we do that? Right now, by default, if you click on your materials tab, you're not going to see any material except you click on this thing, which gives you a default material called material. I'm going to create a new one. I call this mug base. I was going to have a part of it to be I create two separate materials is because the materials themselves are going to be different for the different parts. So think of have one object, but you have multiple materials on the one object. And that's what I'm really aiming to do. There's a little thing I need to fix here. There's a little bit about curve. It feels like a curve on the sides. So I'm going to tighten that a bit by just carrying this up. Wonderful. Let's see. So, Mog Metallic. This part is selected right now, and I'll go into this view, which is going to show us more like a materials view. Let's add somewhat of a, let's go to mug base first, the first one. This one had like an olive green. So that's what we actually do have. I can just use the eyedropper tool and just bring that there and we get. Now that looks like it's going to affect both materials, and the reason for that is because right now, as much as we created two materials, we've not assigned a new material, which would be this one, to the place it's supposed to be assigned. So let's go back into edit mode by pressing tab. Highlight this area, mug metallic. I'm just going to choose to assign that one here. We get so far. Now, my base mug isn't very shiny. So here's what we're going to do. Give that a little bit more color, darken it just a smidge more. And in the options for metallic, you can increase it to get a very metallic finish, right? But we want a little bit of roughness as well. Roughness looks like that. If we lower this, we get something more like this, but we want something relatively like that. Same thing for this. Other one, metallic. Base color, I'll leave it at white or maybe a shade of gray. And metallic is going to be all the way up there, but we're going to lower the roughness to less. Increase the metallic, lower the roughness. Somewhat of a shinier look and feel, which is kind of looking sort of like what we have here. You can see again that crease that we were talking about before. Maybe I should move this down a bit. That does help a smidge, but I'm still noticing a crease. a little bit better. And so that's what we get when it comes to doing our mug. So that's how you make a mug using Blender. Not very difficult. So you just try it and see what you come up with. We can actually go a little step further and add a bit of lighting. I'm going to hide this. And we're going to add a plane mesh. Plane. Scale that up. Right? There's a little scene here with this. And let's think about adding, for example, lights. I'm going to add light. It's going to be your area light. I'm going to move that up. And it's pointing downwards. If you were to render it out, it looks a little something like this because we have a point light here. But if I were to hide that, we're only really seeing the light coming from this. Change the world view, world settings to dark. And I just barely see any light coming from this object here. Go to lights, increase the power, perhaps 30 watts. We might just change the angle on that. So G, hit it slightly. And we're getting something like that. Maybe 50. Light spotlight. Maybe you want, you can do it that way. Problem is, even though I'm seeing this light here, it's not very appealing. So I'm going to create a three-point lighting system. We just duplicate this. I'm going to rotate it about R60. So I should have gone 120, sorry. R120. Something here on this side and make it the color like a cyanish, kind of bluish. Do it again, except rotate again 120 degrees. Purple. Right. The same thing for here. Lower it to 40 perhaps. This, we're getting some interesting looking shapes. Like so. Overall is not very bright. So what I'm going to do, change something. I'm going to change one of my settings here. For my first light, let's change what location I'm looking at it from. Perhaps I want to do something like this. And I'll just let my camera jump to my current view. Control Alt 0. And light, however, using G and then Z twice to affect the local Z axis. That light. This one, 150. The last one, we're getting some very interesting looking lights on our world setting wise. It looks like this, but on this, it looks like this. And I could probably increase or change the material for this. Probably call it. Not only that, but also make it relatively high specular and lower the roughness. So if you wanted to get some level of reflection, and also increase the metallic. Let's do that as well, but I'm just gonna leave that. Yes, a few reflections there. Can increase the sheen. And I'm gonna change one more thing, my renderer to cycles.